Yo, what is up guys? So, a very long time ago, I did my first mod on the Honda Integra, and it was a head unit and a subwoofer installation. Now, that was the very first mod video I made and released onto YouTube, and it was not very good. I recorded it on my phone, I wasn't confident speaking on camera, and I just didn't know what to record really. So, today, with the help of a really cheap eBay doubled-in head unit, we're gonna do a remake of that particular video, and hopefully it turns out a bit better than it did 4 or 5 years ago. Let's get to it. Here it is, a really cheap, dodgy doubled-in head unit bought off eBay. First things first, in order to get to the head unit area, you actually have to remove this entire center console bit, including the armrest. And in order to do that, there is a screw on either side. So on this side it's there. Just gotta lift this off with a flathead, and there are 2 screws underneath that need to come out. Once those 2 screws are removed, you can kind of put your hand underneath and slowly start to lift it up like that, and it just pulls off. So navigate it over the handbrake and remove it. Next up, ashtray that comes out, and so does the cigarette lighter. And in there are 3 screws. You're gonna have to use a long screwdriver to reach those. Mine only had 2 screws in it, and once you've got those out, this whole bit just slides out, like so. You guys will have to remove the cigarette lighter, which is that clip connected to this socket here. Mine was pre-removed from the last time I did the head unit, so that comes out. Then we've got to attack these 2 screws up here, both Phillips heads, 1, 2, and there is a screw right here. So this screw is also a Phillips head, and same thing on the other side, and that then allows us to remove this entire plastic section here. Guess you'll have to take your shift knob off too. This needs to be replaced badly. I found the most helpful way was to pull this back into either gear 2 or gear 4 and have the handbrake ratchet up all the way. That way you can get that out a lot easier. So, just had to disconnect all these wires, and yeah, out she comes, along with the little pocket. If this fits, then I won't have to do any wiring. Oh, look at that. That intro screen looked like it was made using word art. Wow, how lucky was that? I'm actually stoked. That was the easiest installation I've done in my life. Thank goodness they followed some wiring standard, because somehow my legit, although cheap, still legit branded Fusion head unit wired up directly to this unbranded super cheap doubled-in head unit. This doubled-in actually cost me less than that singled-in Fusion head unit did. Half the price, in fact. But yeah, that's so cool. I'm stoked. The only problem though is I turn this puppy on and everything works as it should, but it looks like it was made back in 2005 using word art. So this serves the purpose of what I kind of want, which is just a nice screen, a touch screen which allows me to kind of control music without touching my phone too much, because that's illegal. But it's just grim to look at, to be honest, and I don't like that it doesn't have shuffle options or a progress bar for the music. It's got a fader, and you know, your bass and treble bands, but
yeah, it's not very pleasant to use or look at. And sometimes when you press this, this little dot ends up all the way to the bottom right, and you have to painstakingly use these arrows to navigate it back to the middle, which is, you know, difficult enough while I'm sitting still, let alone driving somewhere. So that's another minus. Yeah, it's $50, so I'm not mad at all. And the fact that it was plug and play and I didn't have to invest any time into the soldering was a huge bonus, because I have decided that I'm not going to use this piece of junk, and I'm going to replace it. And I'll probably, even though I don't need Android Auto, I'll probably just get one and have a bit of a nicer head unit than this. So this is the replacement head unit for my replacement head unit. I just could not stand the other one, so I had to upgrade a little bit. This is probably the cheapest head unit on the market that has Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. So it's still extremely cheap compared to some branded items such as Pioneer, JVC, Kenwood, and so forth. But it's a massive step up from that $50 eBay one that is currently in the Integra and is not going to be for very much longer. So here's the spaghetti mess I made many years ago. What we're going to do is we're going to cut all of this tape off, and then we're going to cut the wire right behind the solder joints I made last time. And then we can attach the ATOTO harness in place of the JVC head unit harness, I think it is. As you can see, the harness is pretty short, pretty far in there. Probably because it's had a few head units hardwired in during its time. Using these labels and a wiring diagram for the Integra's factory harness off the internet, I'm connecting the respective cables. So the speaker cables, the front right positive cable, and then the front right negative cable, and so forth. I'm just twisting the ends together. So you put the wire about where you want to cut it into the jaws, and then you just give it a squeeze. Oh, look at that. And just like that, it stripped that wire. Which is, yeah, it's amazing. Otherwise I'd have had to do all of this with a pair of scissors, and that is not easy at all, and you risk cutting through the wire itself and not just the insulation. Alright, all the wires have been tied, so we're going to solder it together. I really wish I could record all of this, guys, but it's there's actually nowhere for me to set up the tripod in a way that can capture it, and it's really cramped in there and dark. So yeah, I'll just show you what it looks like after. All the connections have been wrapped in electrical tape now, so that should, stop them from shorting out on each other and melting stuff. So what we're going to do is plug this in and see if it works. I've got the mic hooked up to test that, and this is the USB cable which my phone will connect to, so we'll test that. Another thing I noticed is that this head unit only has one subwoofer output, whereas I've got two RCA cables there. Simple fix, just a really cheap RCA Y-splitter will fix it, but it means we have to wait for that to arrive. So in the meantime, the subwoofer will be plugged into these two white and red RCA inputs, which are for the rear left and rear right. This means we won't get subwoofer control for now, but the subwoofer should work. Whoop, nothing. So, this is why you disconnect your battery before working on electrical components of the car. So I probably shorted it out or something, because as you can see, the fuse is broken, and I've got a replacement here. As you can see, that's intact. As you can see here on the thing, that's the backup for the radio. So we're gonna put that in and see how it goes. The reason I knew it was a fuse that had blown was because the clock also wasn't turning on. So both the radio and the clock were blank, and because they share the same fuse, if neither of them are working at the same time, chances are you've blown the fuse. Take two. There we go. That is a lot better. That already looks much nicer than the other head unit. Absolutely slaps. Had to turn all of this down because if I leave it up, the subwoofer gets ridiculously loud. Alright, let's give Android Auto a go. Doing this with one hand is difficult. Oh, look at that. Automatically, I'm getting a prompt on my phone. Alright, looks like it is installing some of the software that's required. That is very cool. Alright, everything works, which is fantastic. The next step is to clean this mess up. So here it is in action. We've got the two RCA cables connected to the splitter.
Man, this is proving to be quite the mission, guys. When I installed my last head unit, I had to do barely anything, but after finally receiving that subwoofer splitter, I realized that in order to get the doubled in to stay fixed and not fall out of the cavity, I needed to buy a fascia kit. So this little fascia then screws onto these two ISO holders, which will go on either side with a head unit like that, and they screw onto this and kind of act as a cage, which we can then insert into the Integra's doubled in cavity. So with a singled in, I didn't have to deal with any of this garbage because there was a pocket that sat underneath, which meant I didn't actually have... What do you want? There was a pocket that sat underneath the actual head unit, which supported it just fine. But with this, obviously the pocket is replaced. Yeah, damn, this was meant to just be a really quick, easy replacement. And that shitty $50 thing was just meant to be it. But now I've spent money on the fascia, on the splitter, and a much more expensive head unit. So, as with all things car related, this is taking a lot longer than I expected and costing more than I budgeted for. Okay, there it is. It's in. You know, slight gap here, but as I said, I don't care. It's in. Alright guys, we are finally finished with this entire process. The USB, I kind of just routed it from the back and didn't bother drilling any holes anywhere just yet. I'm just glad it works. This entire process was meant to be quick, simple, easy, and cheap, and it ended up being none of those. I thought it was going to be all of those because I have done this before with a singled-in head unit. And as you guys know, that first head unit was so shit, I couldn't stand it, so I've gone with this. But getting this fitment correct, I had to buy a cage, and you know, that cage required a lot of chopping and filing to modify to fit into the cavity, and even then it was pretty sketchy the way it kind of had to be jammed in, but it's secured, so that's good. Yeah, and I had to wait for these parts. I had to do some soldering because the original ISO connectors don't fit and it didn't come with a harness, nor could I find one online, despite I saw Rex H's video and his came with a harness, which made it really easy for him, but I didn't get that luxury, and they just didn't seem to sell them. So yeah, this process took a lot longer than it should have. Reflecting back on it, I don't know if it's worth it, to be honest. This was meant to just be a, you know, like a $50 to $100 venture, and it ended up costing about 3 to 4 times that, which is still really good for an Apple CarPlay or Android Auto head unit. Overall, I'm happy, but I don't think I would have gone this route had if I known how much work and how much money it was going to be before I started. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I will catch you on the next one.
but I've never seen you bang. You say you've got them drugs, but I've never seen you slang.